Welcome to Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a nation often pictured on postcards, the Dominican Republic. But we're not here for the beaches.
No, not today. We're delving into something, well, more complex. The persistent challenges of corruption.
Exactly. Have you ever wondered about those sort of hidden currents that can erode a country's foundations, even one that looks vibrant on the surface?
That's really the core question we want to tackle. This deep dive focuses squarely on corruption in the Dominican Republic. We'll be pulling insights from, various places, news reports, an academic paper.
Right. The aim is to get a handle on the key dynamics without getting totally bogged down in every single detail.
Precisely. We've got a Wikipedia entry laying out the Odebrecht case, which is a big one.
Yeah, and news articles from Acento and Infobay giving that on-the-ground journalistic perspective.
And then there's this really interesting academic article from RIPS. It digs into the political structures that might actually, enable corruption. So different angles.
Different angles, maybe some contrasting views.
Could be. Our mission here is pretty clear, though. Extract the most crucial insights. What's the nature, the extent, the impact of corruption there? We want to give you a clearer, more informed understanding.
Okay, let's get into it. Starting with the name that just keeps cropping up across Latin America when you talk about corruption. Odebrecht.
Indeed. The Odebrecht scandal is, well, a major starting point. The U.S. Department of Justice revealed how this Brazilian construction giant engaged in, frankly, massive bribery schemes.
All over the place.
All over the place. And the Dominican Republic was definitely involved.
Right. And the immediate reaction there was quite telling, wasn't it? The Procurator General ordered all state institutions...
Get this, they had 48 hours.
48 hours
Yeah.
to produce every single contract they'd had with Odebrecht going back to 2001.
It sounds like they were taking it very seriously, at least right off the bat.
It does. What happened next? There was an agreement, right?
Yeah, they reached a deal with Odebrecht. The company agreed to pay $184 million.
Okay, $184 million. But the fascinating part is that this was double the amount they actually admitted to paying in bribes, wasn't it?
Exactly. They admitted to $92 million in bribes, but the settlement was double that.
So why the extra money? What's the thinking there?
Well, the deal framed that $184 million as the maximum penalty allowed under Dominican law, specifically Law number 44806 on bribery in commerce and investment.
Ah, okay.
So essentially, Odebrecht got to avoid what could have been a really long, messy trial. It was sort of an expedited penalty.
A faster resolution, maybe less damaging publicity, or fewer names revealed compared to a full trial.
That's one interpretation, certainly. A quicker, though financially significant outcome versus potentially exposing more powerful individuals or deeper systemic issues.
Makes sense. Now, the investigation itself was officially labeled complex. What did that mean in practice?
Declaring it complex, which the Procurator General requested, basically bought them more time for the investigation.
Okay, extended deadlines.
Extended deadlines, yeah. And it also opened the door to using something called the Criterion of Opportunity. It's in Article 34 of their penal code.
And what does that do?
It allows for potentially more lenient treatment or a faster process for individuals who cooperate significantly with the investigation.
So cooperate and you might get a better deal. A bit of a double-edged sword, perhaps.
It can be. It encourages information flow, but some might see it as letting people off the hook too easily. It's a strategic tool.
And they worked with Brazil on this too, right? The Lava Jato connection?
Absolutely. They collaborated with the Brazilian authorities who were deep into the massive Lava Jato or car wash investigation. That was the huge probe in Brazil that really blew the lid off the Odebrecht bribery schemes across the region.
International cooperation seems essential in these kinds of cross-border cases. What about individuals in the DRR? Were there immediate consequences?
Yes, there were. In June 2017, a special investigating judge from the Supreme Court ordered pretrial detention for 10 people implicated in the case.
10 people. Any prominent names?
Oh, yes. Angel Rondon, who was Odebrecht's commercial representative in the country. Also, Victor Diaz-Rua, a former Minister of Public Works. Others included Conrado Piluga Arseno, Themistocles Montas, several former ministers and officials.
And the detention periods varied.
They did, ranging from, I think, 6 months up to 12 months in pretrial detention. So, held in custody while the investigation continued before any formal trial or conviction.
Okay, so some high-profile figures faced immediate action, at least temporarily. But Odebrecht, as big as it is, doesn't exist in a vacuum, does it? Yeah. Our sources point to a longer history here.
That's a crucial point. We need to zoom out from just Odebrecht. The Acento article really highlights this backlog, this history of potential corruption cases that seemingly went nowhere, especially during the Leonel Fernández governments from 2004 to 2012.
A backlog is putting it mildly. The article mentions 66 audits.
66. Submitted by the Chamber of Accounts, that's the state's own auditing body, between 2005 and 2010.
And these audits supposedly contained evidence of administrative corruption.
Clear evidence, according to the article. They were sent to the Specialized Prosecutor's Office for Administrative Corruption, PEPSON.
PEPCA, Procuraduría Especializada para la Persecución de la Corrupción Administrativa, the office designed specifically for this.
Exactly. But the article states these 66 cases, flagged by the state auditors, were simply never investigated.
Never investigated. Who was heading PEPSI back then? That seems pretty relevant.
The deputy prosecutor running PEPSI at that time was a man named Otoniel Bonilla.
Okay.
And interestingly, the article notes he's now a prominent figure and close associate of Leonel Fernández in his current political party, Fuerza del Pueblo.
Right. So the person who should have been investigating these claims against officials in Fernández's administration is now politically aligned with him. That definitely raises question.
It does. Was it incompetence?
Lack of
resources?
Oh.
Or something more deliberate?
Yeah.
The article leaves that open, but points out the connection.
Which institutions were flagged in these uninvestigated audits?
It was a pretty wide range. The General Directorate of National Assets, the Port Authority, the Municipal League, the Land Transport Office, the Superintendents of Electricity, the National Institute of Hydraulic Resources.
A lot of key state bodies.
And also, audits from 37 different municipalities apparently showed serious issues as well.
And we're not talking about minor clerical errors here, are we?
Not at all. The audits reportedly uncovered things like misuse and deviation of public funds, irregular contracts, overvalued purchases, missing assets, awarding works without proper bidding, undocumented payments, contract alterations, overvalued works, even outright theft of assets.
And the sums involved.
Reportedly in the billions of pesos.
Billions. And legally speaking, those cases, they just timed out.
According to the Acento article, yes. The statute of limitations has apparently expired for any potential legal action on those specific cases from that 2005-2010 period. It's a stark example of how delays or inaction can lead to impunity.
That's incredibly frustrating for anyone hoping for accountability. It feeds that sense of impunity.
It really does. The article even quotes the former National District Prosecutor, Yenny Bernice Reynoso, back in 2014. Regarding a shelved case against Victor Diaz-Rua, she said something like, 18 months of investigation, hundreds of pieces of evidence, but it was judicially prohibited to prosecute corruption during the PLD governments.
Judicially prohibited. That's a strong statement. It implies active blocking.
It definitely suggests powerful forces were preventing accountability.
And Fernández himself, he has acknowledged corruption exists.
Yes, the article mentions that in 2021, when he was running for president again, he admitted corruption exists in all governments. But he specifically argued it's a much bigger problem when it's state-sponsored or mega corruption.
So acknowledging it, but framing it. Does anyone raise concerns about Otoniel Bonilla, the prosecutor, back then?
Yes, anti-corruption groups actually petitioned for his removal back in 2012. So the concerns aren't just retrospective.
Okay, so this history of alleged uninvestigated corruption sets a worrying stage. Let's shift to more recent times. The sources also mention ongoing challenges within the judicial system itself, right?
Yes, the Acento piece touches on this too. Even when cases do make it to court now, the process seems painfully slow.
Painfully slow, like cases being rescheduled because there's no fuel to transport defendants? Is that real?
Apparently so. It highlights these basic logistical, systemic hurdles. The article points out that major corruption cases from the 2020-2021 period are moving at a snail's pace.
How slow are we talking?
Some have been going for 4 years without even a first instance sentence. 4 years.
Wow. That kind of delay must absolutely kill public trust.
You'd think so. And it ties into what the Latino Barometro survey found for 2024, generally low trust in the judicial system across Latin America. Around 28%, I think.
Not surprising, given these timelines, especially for cases involving potentially huge sums of money and powerful people.
Exactly. And Participation Ciudadana, a civic group tracking these things, made that point in their report.
What did they say?
They argue that these complex corruption cases involving powerful networks need special attention. You can't just lump them in with general court backlog statistics. They're worried about obstruction and the sheer scale of the alleged graft.
And the longer these delays drag on, the greater the risk that the cases just expire.
That's the big fear, the statute of limitations. Article 45 of the Dominican Penal Code sets it at 10 years for criminal action. So yes, there's a very real risk that these lengthy proceedings could simply result in the extinction of public action. Case dismissed due to time.
Which would be a massive blow to accountability efforts. So we have this backdrop: historical impunity, current judicial delays. Now, the academic paper from RIPS introduces this concept, the party cartel thesis. What's that about?
Right, the party cartel idea, as Jacqueline Jimenez Polanco lays it out, drawing on work by Katz and Mayer. It offers a framework for understanding the political landscape itself.
Okay, a framework. What does it describe?
It essentially describes a system where the ruling party and the state become deeply intertwined, almost meshed together. And crucially, there's often collusion between different parties.
Interpenetration and collusion. So less about genuine opposition and more about maintaining the system.
Sort of.
Yeah.
Imagine established players who, compete sometimes, but ultimately have a shared interest in keeping the rules of the game favorable to them, even if it's not always great for the public or for genuine accountability.
Okay, break that down. What are the key features of a party cartel, according to this model?
Well, several things. Significant state aid and support flowing to the parties. Widespread clientelism, exchanging votes or support for jobs or favors. Strong party control over state institutions. Politics becoming a kind of self-referential profession, detached from the base.
Limited competition, too.
Yeah, limited competition often based more on who can manage the system efficiently rather than deep ideological divides. Controlled electoral contests. Very expensive campaigns funded heavily by state subsidies.
And the role of party members.
Often quite weak. Plus, privileged access to state-regulated media. And fundamentally, the party starts acting almost like an agent of the state, blurring the lines.
That paints a picture of a very entrenched, self-serving political system. And the article argues the PLD, the Dominican Liberation Party, fits this party cartel model.
Yes, the author makes the case that the PLD effectively became a cartel party in the Dominican Republic.
How did they allegedly achieve that?
Through long stretches in power, institutional reforms that were intertwined with clientelism and strategic alliances with minor parties designed to weaken the main opposition, primarily the PRD and the PRC historically.
The paper mentions a specific example of this collusion, the Pact of the Blue Ties. Sounds intriguing. What was that?
Yes, the Pact of the Blue Ties, sometimes called the Pact for Impunity. This reportedly happened in 2010. It was an alleged deal between Leonel Fernández, who was dominant in the PLD then, and Miguel Vargas, the PRD's presidential candidate.
A deal between the ruling party leader and the main opposition candidate. What was the trade?
Essentially, Vargas apparently supported constitutional reforms pushed by Fernández. In return, Fernández supposedly backed Vargas's presidential ambitions for 2012.
So, political horse trading behind the scenes. What were the alleged consequences?
They were pretty significant, according to the paper. Vargas and his faction within the PRD supposedly got benefits, like government posts and maybe construction sector advantages.
And for Fernández and the PLD?
They managed to weaken and divide the main opposition party, the PRD. And crucially, Fernández's faction within the PLD solidified its control over key state institutions: the Supreme Court, the Constitutional Court, the Electoral Tribunal, plus executive, legislative, and municipal branches, all apparently done without the full knowledge of other key PRD figures.
A major consolidation of power facilitated by a deal with the opposition leader. The paper also mentions an earlier alliance involving Balaguer and Bosch.
Yeah, that was back in 1996, an alliance between Balaguer's PRSC and Bosch's PLD. It initially helped the PLD, allowing Fernández to first become president.
But it didn't last.
No. The PRSC apparently felt shortchanged on government positions.
Yeah.
Balaguer famously called the PLD members come solos, like they eat alone, don't share. Eventually, the PRSC broke the alliance and gradually weakened as a major force.
So a pattern of strategic alliances that seem to ultimately benefit the PLD and weaken rivals. The paper has data on this reliance on minor parties, too.
It does. Table 1 in the RIPS article clearly shows how the PLD consistently relied on alliances with smaller parties to get over the 50% mark in presidential elections from 2004 right through to 2016. Even when the PLD's own vote share was below 50%, the allies pushed them over the top.
Beyond alliances, the party cartel model also points to questionable election practices, right?
Absolutely. The article alleges things like vote buying, control over media coverage, ineffective election administration.
And a large number of captive voters.
Exactly. State employees, recipients of subsidies who might feel pressured to vote for the governing party. The paper notes a big jump in the public payroll between 2008 and 2015, like a 46.7% increase.
Wow.
And in the 2016 election, state beneficiaries reportedly made up almost 23% of the entire electoral roll. That's a significant chunk who might be influenced.
It sounds like leveraging the state apparatus itself to maintain power. And these expensive campaigns, typical of cartel parties, where does the money come from?
Heavily reliant on state funding. The article estimates presidential campaign costs running from 1 to 1.5 billion Dominican pesos.
Billion with a B.
Billion with a B. And it points to a huge spike in the fiscal deficit around the 2016 election period, RD $34.8 billion, suggesting massive state spending potentially linked to securing re-election.
So the state funds the parties control the state, kind of a reinforcing cycle. Now, the article gets into specific examples of alleged corruption and impunity. Let's look at Hector Valdez Albizu at the central bank.
Yeah, this one's pretty striking. In 2014, there were allegations that Valdez Albizu, the central bank governor, and his close circle basically awarded themselves a massive severance package, 500 million Dominican pesos total.
500 million.
Yeah, with RD $60 million allegedly for Albizu himself. This was apparently done in anticipation of a potential change in government.
And what happened? Was there any prosecution?
According to the article, no prosecution followed. And chillingly, it mentions a similar incident allegedly happened back in 2000, also without consequences. It suggests a pattern of impunity at the very top.
Okay, then there's the case involving Carlos Amarante Borré and Jose Anibal Sanz Geminian linked to migration and education.
Right. A Chamber of Accounts audit back in 2008 allegedly uncovered significant financial irregularities during their time at the General Directorate of Migration.
What kind of irregularities?
We're talking over 226 million pesos, allegedly unaccounted for, undocumented purchases of construction materials, duplicate payrolls adding up to over 188 million pesos, off-the-books accounting, misuse of representation funds, a whole list.
Serious findings. Were they held accountable?
Despite these allegations, the article states neither faced legal consequences. Instead, they are appointed to head other public entities, often bringing their close associates with them.
Like musical chairs, but with positions of power.
Pretty much. Amarante Borré later became Minister of Education, where further corruption allegations surfaced. It feeds that narrative of powerful individuals just moving between posts despite accusations.
Then there's Felix Bautista and Oijoso, the State Engineering Supervisory Office. The sums mentioned there are staggering.
Felix Bautista, a powerful PLD senator. The accusations involved RD 26 billion again during his time leading OISO, allegations of corruption, money laundering, illicit enrichment. OISO itself was described by critics as basically an extortion network.
And there were calls to shut it down entirely.
Yes, given the perception that it was just a hub for corruption.
What happened legally with Bautista?
Well, the Prosecutor General's office initially pursued the case. But then the Prosecutor General himself, Francisco Dominguez Brito, also a member of the PLD's political committee, declined to appeal a Supreme Court ruling that dismissed the case against Bautista, a no lugar ruling.
So the top prosecutor dropped the appeal against a powerful member of his own party.
That's what the article suggests. It alleges the decision was linked to political negotiations around constitutional reforms and Bautista's close ties to then-President Leonel Fernández.
And Bautista was re-elected senator after all this.
Re-elected with a very high percentage of the vote, despite these serious allegations hanging over him. It really underscores the challenges in holding powerful figures accountable.
The article also mentions an earlier alleged clandestine loan involving Oizoe and a company called Sunland Corporation.
Yes, back in 2006. An alleged U.S. $130 million loan between OISO and Sunland, supposedly authorized by President Fernández himself without the required congressional approval.
In that case.
Also challenged in court, but ultimately dismissed by the Supreme Court. The paper suggests the Supreme Court, allegedly stacked with allies of the ruling party, played a key role in deflecting these corruption charges.
It keeps coming back to the role of institutions. Then there's the 2013 lawsuit involving Victor Rua, Felix Bautista again, and Leonel Fernández himself.
Right, a lawsuit filed by the Alianza País party, alleging prevarication, fraud, money laundering related to public works projects.
And this ties back to Victor Diaz Rua's time at the Ministry of Public Works.
Exactly, a Chamber of Accounts audit covering his tenure there, 2008-2012, reportedly found RD $60 billion in budgetary anomalies. Just mind-boggling figures.
60 billion pesos. What kind of anomaly?
The audit allegedly found a whole spectrum. Issues with budget control, revenue management, accounting systems, cash handling, unreconciled bank accounts, bounced checks, unreported income, unauthorized equipment transfers, payments to unregistered suppliers, undocumented disbursements.
It sounds like chaos, or worse.
Ghost payrolls allegedly benefiting PLD members, hidden bank accounts. And on top of that, over RD $250 million in bonuses were reportedly distributed to high-ranking officials.
And what happened to Diaz-Rua in the end?
Despite an initial prosecution, he was ultimately acquitted. Again, following extensive audit findings, this outcome just fueled more concerns about impunity for the powerful.
It's a really troubling pattern emerging from these examples. Now, shifting gears slightly, the InfoBay article brings in another dimension: the link between corruption and drug trafficking.
Yes, the InfoBay piece connects those dots, highlighting how intertwined these issues can be. It notes Danilo Medina's high re-election percentage in 2016.
But contrasts that popularity with criticism from outside.
Exactly. It immediately mentions critical reports from Amnesty International about police impunity and discrimination against Haitians, and that damning report from Lorente and Cuenca calling the DR a corruption capital in Latin America due to weak institutions and the PLD's dominance.
So popular support coexisting with serious international concerns about governance. The article also touches on the challenges the new Attorney General faced in 2016 regarding organized crime.
It points to the Dickin case conviction as a stark example. This was where anti-narcotics officials themselves were found guilty of stealing 900 kilograms of cocaine. It illustrates the potential depth of infiltration in state institutions.
Wow. Officials stealing seized drugs.
And then the subsequent arrest of 3 Dominicans in Puerto Rico with a massive 1,000 kilograms of cocaine further suggested the country's role as a transit point. Beyond these big busts, you have to wonder how systemic corruption, maybe weak border controls, bribed officials, facilitates this trade more broadly.
That's deeply worrying. And it seems even direct accusations linking prominent politicians to drug money haven't led to investigations.
The article specifically highlights the unresolved accusation by convicted drug trafficker Quirino Paulino Castillo. He claimed he financed Leonel Fernández's campaign to the tune of US $4.5 million.
A direct accusation from a convicted trafficker.
A very serious one. Yet, according to the article, no investigation was ever opened into this claim. It also notes Castillo was actually a member of the Army, another institution allegedly plagued by corruption and narco-trafficking influence.
So we're looking at this complex web, alleged corruption across sectors, potentially reinforced by political structures like the party cartel, and further complicated by the corrosive influence of drug money. It paints a really challenging picture for the Dominican Republic.
It really does. To sum up, corruption in the DR appears to be, well, a deeply entrenched problem with significant historical roots. The dynamics described in the party cartel thesis, combined with major challenges within the judicial system, seem to make things worse.
Odebrecht is a big piece, but just one piece.
Exactly. It's a prominent example, but that historical failure to investigate numerous allegations, plus the specific cases of alleged malfeasance we've discussed at various levels, it suggests a systemic issue. And then the potential links to drug trafficking add another deeply concerning layer.
For you, our listener, looking to get up to speed quickly but thoroughly, we hope this deep dive has given you a structured overview of this complex situation, drawing on key events and analysis from these credible sources.
So considering everything we've discussed, what are the potential long-term implications for the Dominican Republic's democratic institutions, for its international standing, if these patterns of alleged corruption and impunity continue?
And perhaps more personally, what role do you think international pressure, but also local civic engagement within the DR can play in tackling such deep-seated challenges? We encourage you to maybe dig deeper into these issues yourself and keep thinking critically.